Hey guys, my name is Loco Doko, the better looking host of Listen Loco, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode, Thorin's Rotations. This one is going to be about the LCS, the NA region. My guests for this one, obviously the co-host is Crumbz again. You should be able to figure that out by now. We've done a couple of episodes already. He was in the other ones. Is that enough for you? You may remember him from Dignitas teams that looked good in the regular split and ultimately didn't deliver in the playoffs. So probably should narrow it down a little bit more, but that was every single split of Dignitas. So problem solved there, right?
Including it? Not including this.
No, not including this one. Maybe in the past. And our guest for this one is going to be Malaclypse, who, if people don't remember, he actually did an episode of Narrative Wake with me. I'm going to say maybe last year, maybe the beginning of this year. So was it last year?
It was last year. It's last year.
And basically, it was the one that was about the great top laners or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and top lane through the years, I think it was something along those lines, and we kind of like, again, it was narrative work, so we weren't kind of like the big historical picture. And he also works as, what is your actual title for Immortals?
Coach.
Just a coach. He's one of the coaching staff. First of all, he's one of the surviving coaching staff, so there's that. And then secondly, it's all right, this episode's about the playoffs, so we don't have to get, nothing awkward has to happen on this episode. We can just give his opinions on other teams. So, which in many ways is one of the main parts of being a coach. So let's start, right? There's a lot of topics we can get into for this one, a lot of really great ones as well. But one place I thought would start, since the regular split is over, and just like actually traditional sports is what this is based off, we've come to the awards season where you give the awards out for the regular split. So soon we'll find out who the MVP is, we find out who the coach is today, and we find out who's been voted All-Pro. Now, this is one area where, to start off, I already know, just by the history of the votes, because I've checked almost every single one of these since they actually, by the way, props to Riot for at least putting out like the actual votes and who voted for who. I think that's an important thing to do. But since every time they've done that, and whenever you see a weird one, what you do is you go into that document, the PDF, I'll link it in the description box actually, and you just go through and you look who voted for who and you try and figure out how did it end up like this, right? And the problem is this is where I want to start. Is I can tell by the way that they're voting and the like flippant nature that some of the players and coaches are voting, like silly votes, essentially troll votes, that they not only don't seem to care about the award, but they don't take it seriously. Like we're not talking debatable stuff. Like, for example, if you think Bjergsen is the best mid laner, I don't have a problem with that. I personally think it's Jensen, but that's okay. We can have that discussion. They're the candidates, We can have a great discussion about that. If, on the other hand, though, you voted first place All-Pro mid laner, Jizuke, who wouldn't even fit the criteria because he didn't even play most of the split, you're obviously trolling. Like, I don't need to be, get into some weird grey area of, well, the subjective opinions, man, and, maybe say... No, on that one, it's obvious you're trolling. So actually, where I want to start with this is the reason why that's quite alarming to me is, as someone who is a fan of some traditional sports, NFL, NBA, it really matters if you get these particular kinds of awards in your career. Like, outside of the MVP for the season, which only one person gets, these are the next best awards. Like, just like if you, I mean, I'm going to show on my age here, but back in the day, if you used to go and rent a movie, it would always say on the poster on the box that, 3 Oscar-nominated main actor or something, it's the equivalent in acting. So that becomes like a career marker that you were like a great actor if you were nominated for, best actor 2 or 3 times in your career. So similarly, if you're an NBA legend and you have like 10 all first team all NBA awards, and this other guy has 5, because they actually vote that award correctly, the odds that the guy with 5 is better than you with 10 are very low. But unfortunately, when I look at the results that have been yielded from these All-Pro, not only who wins, but what some of the votes are, history's going to be fucked if people look back in time. Like what I just referenced there, the really bad example. Someone could look back now, and even though he obviously didn't get actually like first place, someone could look back and go, oh wow, someone actually thought Jizuke was the best mid. Spoiler, nobody thought Jizuke was the best mid. That's why I'm saying it's making a mockery of history. So what do you actually think about this, Malaclypse, coming from your side? Obviously, I know coaches, teams must have opinions about these things. Do you have a sense for, do people give a fuck about this award, do you think?
No, they don't. I don't think anyone does. I mean, I think some people might, but overall, just based upon who's voting for it, how the votes come out, and yeah, even like the coach vote, like there's a lot of things you can't even know internally how things are going on teams. So it's just strange how that vote is even possible. Like I think rookie vote works great. I think All-Pro works fine if
people were serious.
Yeah.
As an average, it'd probably work out, you'd hope.
Yeah, exactly. If you didn't have a lot of, like, if people who clearly don't actually know the game don't have an equal vote to people who do, because then it molds the vote over.
So you're referring here, just for implication, what you're implying here is another thing about the All-Pro that people often get shocked about is it's not that it's just coaches and players and people like that who vote. If people don't know, they have actually a fairly substantial media element who get a vote. And as Malaclypse is saying, their vote is equal. Like all the votes are the same. So in theory, if 2 or 3 people who, if you go and look at this list, I challenge even the most hardcore fan to know who these media members are. I work in the media and I don't know who some of these people are. So as you're saying, they're like, what qualification do they have that they know the game equal to a coach, except that I assume they go to the LCS studio or have done like interviews and that's why they're on there. I mean, you'll notice, by the way, I'm not on there. There's no Monte Cristo on there. Like, it's not like they're just picking out people, like these are knowledgeable media members. No, like, some of them are almost like, I won't say they're random because I assume they work in League of Legends, but I've never heard of some of these people. So I'm kind of with you on that. It's one thing that there's already some unusual votes, but you have to obviously also look at who is voting. I think that is an issue.
Well, on the knowledge part, on media not knowing or being qualified enough, I barely feel qualified to actually vote for a lot of these players. Like, sure. I know that I watch these games religiously, daily. Like, I watch so many games, and I still don't have enough information to confidently say, yes, this player is better than this other one, because, like Malaclypse is saying, you don't play with them. You don't actually know what they're contributing to the game, what the player is expected to do, because they all have a specific job that they have to achieve within the game for their teams. That job is different across every team. So how could we know how well they're performing to what is expected of them? You just could not. And to have somebody that has no idea, let alone of the game itself, to vote on these subjects where the people that are at the helm aren't even sure. Like, how does that make any sense for creating a fair narrative of who the best players are?
And by the way, when they come to these sorts of votes as well, people will always say, like, well, it doesn't matter because typically, right, the actual outcome is usually fairly reasonable because there's so many people vote, as long as there's only a few troll votes in there, overall it'll even itself out roughly. But actually, if people don't know, voting incorrectly, or even worse, and this is the most criminal one to me, it's bad enough if you troll, but if you troll as a tactical form of voting to get your dude to win, that is really dark. And actually, I have seen that in the past. Like, I've seen in years where, for example, I know there was one year, right, where the main MVP candidates were both Bjergsen and Doublelift when they were both on TSM, because it was that split where they just went like 16-1 or whatever the fuck, it was 17-1 and like stomped everyone in the best of 3. So obviously it was going to be someone from TSM was the MVP. But believe it or not, what made it so that like it was skewed to Bjergsen, even though he did get slightly more first place votes, I remember if you went back through it, here's the difference. Because he's not a trash talker, no one actually is among the players hates Bjergsen. So everyone voted for Bjergsen pretty normally at number 1 and number 2 mid, like it was him and Jensen, I'm assuming, off the top of my head. But then what they did for Doublelift was, because Doublelift is a trash talker, and obviously has some players and coaches who don't like him, you would look through and you'd have the same scenario. There was fuckers putting like Sneaky or someone above him, and putting him like third All-Pro LCS in a split where he's like, shit stomping every single lane he's in. So like that stuff even can eventually, if it goes bad enough, potentially affect history. Like you don't want who won the award to be based on like, oh, well, this guy did tactical voting, which if people don't know, this is one thing I alluded to in my video, basically, that the way people fuck with Jensen kills me, because it's one thing if you have your favourite player, that's fine. Like I said earlier on, if you think Bjergsen is better than Jensen, that's fine. We can have a great discussion about that. But if you just hate Jensen, and like if you look at some of the votes on this, dude, it's one thing to not have him 1 or 2. There's people who didn't even put him top 3. There's people who put troll votes top 3. Like, again, I don't feel like that's subjective. That just feels like you probably shouldn't be involved with the vote. You're not taking it seriously.
Well, then, I mean, I think you should just have more voters. There's too few, specifically, I think, from the players' side. You have 14 media, 15 Riot, 20 LCS teams and players. Why just 1? if we just doubled the LCS rosters for voting, right, just one more person instead of a single person, you could actually, I think, fix a lot of this, because I think it's a lot easier for the right player to come through if you have the people that are in the weeds casting the votes.
The weird thing is, I don't know if you know this, I don't know which sports you guys follow, but like one of my favorite sports actually in this regard is the NFL, because the NFL and actually the NHL both have a thing where, like, yes, there's an MVP that's decided by the media, which actually is the one they play up for obvious reasons because it's the fucking media. But if people don't know, there's also like another MVP that's player voted. So in the NHL, for example, there are years where the person who wins the MVP is the guy with the best storyline, but then the person who wins that, whatever the player award is, that might actually just be the real best player, because the idea is they all played against him, so they know who they think is the king of the game at the time. So in some ways, by the way, that's like almost the unofficial MVP award for the players, because they know that, like, if you're the daddy, then you just get voted for like 5 seasons in a row and you were the real best player. It wasn't like the problem with the media angle, again, this is why I'm skeptical about media being involved, is I know this even from traditional sports. The media not only sometimes don't know the game, but they fall in love with the narrative. So as a result, one classic thing they do is something that is so against the idea of competitive integrity, which is what we're watching these bloody games for, which is they get voter fatigue. So if you're LeBron James, or in this case, the irony is if you're Bjergsen, the media would go, it's not sexy if Bjergsen or LeBron wins again. They've won 3 or 4 times. Right, who's the best player who's never won and his team was never good before? So this split, for example, I don't even know. I guess you'd pick like Power of Evil or something ridiculous. You'd have to go some really wacky angle, but they do that sometimes. Like they just want it to be someone exciting, because obviously that sells the papers, that gets the clicks, right? Different guy MVP. Right, what about this? Let's transition this to actual like discussion where we can talk about the game instead of just analysing why journalists are shit, basically. So like I alluded to there, I actually think a really interesting discussion is who is your best mid laner of the split? Because when I made that video was about like the historical way that Jensen was categorized. I'm definitely not saying, as I pointed out in that video, that you can't have Bjergsen as the best mid laner. If you think he was, like, listen, I think he was obviously the best player on TSM and they turned it around. So who is your best mid laner, Malaclypse? Who would you pick for this split?
I'm trying to remember what my vote was.
Jensen, Niski, and...
You had Niski above Bjergsen?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And I was about to pick Power of Evil actually over Bjergsen.
What's your reasoning for these picks? Let's start with Jensen. Why did you have Jensen number 1?
So Niski, it was between Niski or Jensen, clearly. With Jensen, he's more clearly, like, you can see in his individual play more clearly than you can with Niski, because Niski is very tethered to
contextual,
Blabber.
Isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yes. He's very tethered to Blabber. So being able to view a player based on their individual merit tends to be more difficult when they play this sort of play style.
Yes.
Because a lot of it then comes down to things you can't see because it's only things you can hear, and comes in the communication. Then you can actually hear like how that relationship is actually ran and like who's really wearing the pants in it, so to say. Right?
I mean, basically, there's a good reason why. I mean, he even does it himself, but everyone always contrasts Niski with Doin B, High, etc. Because as you're saying, half the problem with Niski is you're looking at the Niski-Blabber relationship, which has been very successful, and you're trying to figure out who made who, essentially. Like, who's the one doing most of this, or who's the driving force? Because depending on which side you come down on, one of them's probably the best for you. It might be the jungler, might be the mid lane. So that was kind of your dilemma. I get what you mean, by the way, because the difference is, this is one of the reasons why I think it's just haterism that Jensen doesn't really get his flowers over the years, especially when he was on Cloud9. Is like, dude, to me, he's one of the most obvious eye test players I've ever seen. Like, if I watch him, he's just got an amazing laning phase, like almost every fucking year of his life. Like, when's this guy ever not had the meta champions, not being able to lane, not being able to be up in CS all the time? It's just all the time. And then in team fights, he definitely knows what the fuck he's doing. Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's legit. Did you have someone else, Crumbz?
Yeah, I did. I had Bjergsen, Jensen, and PoE. And for me, the criteria was more about Niski wasn't in the main contention because of that. I could not tell what's going on with Niski in the first place. And towards the back half, the control mages were not that good. So I figured if he's going to go this direction, I'm not able to put him above PoE. So no Niski there. But for me, what struck me out for what got Bjergsen over the top was that I felt like I think it was the Cloud9 game, and yes, the Cloud9 game where they beat the Hecarim comp, where Jensen had a really terrible game. It really wasn't fantastic. And then when I saw the first C9 game where he was playing Twisted Fate, I felt like, yes, they actually got off to a good start, but it took 20 minutes to see a single port. So the games where I felt like that the worst games that Jensen had, in my opinion, were worse than Bjergsen's. And so because of that, I felt like Bjergsen was a better mid laner.
Here's the thing. Normally, Crumbz, I would push back and be like, those are only 2 games. But to be fair, the reason why actually I don't think that's unreasonable as like a tiebreaker way to decide is most people are in a kind of the consensus that LCS isn't very good in terms of the quality of the teams this split and this year. So Cloud9 is one of the few legit teams. So I can see why you would value the games against them so highly. So I think there's something fair to that. I can see. By the way, on the whole Niski angle, I'm kind of like Crumbz in that sense, Malaclypse. Like, I kind of basically somewhat dismissed Niski from this discussion. For me, I test is like Jensen or Bjergsen, because my big issue is, this is just my own speculation, because again, I'm not in the team, I can't know what the comms are, but just from seeing how Niski worked with Svenskeren and then how he worked with Blabber in the spring when they had no competition and they were running over everyone. Listen, I know everyone else is going to say, because he's the guy getting the kill in the game, that Blabber's the better part of the... I personally think, even though it's going to sound harsh when I phrase it this way, I essentially think Niski made Blabber. Like, without hating, here's the comparison. If you take Closer and Blabber and swap them around, and Blabber goes to Golden Guardians, and what's his name? Closer goes to Cloud9. I think Closer already, by the way, is fucking amazing, but I think he would be the best jungler, hands down. And then I think, on the other hand, I think what you would see from Blabber is he'd have some games that were amazing, where it all went great and he got off early, and you'd have some games where he wouldn't have a Niski and he would just fall flat on his face and int. Like, I've always said, this guy's like a Chinese jungler who's just fucking found his way in LCS. Like, I'm not hating.
Damonte is kind of similar to Niski, actually.
He helps. He definitely works with him. But the difference is, though, I feel like Damonte is a little bit more like... Put it this way, he's the bitch on that end of the relationship. If there's no... I have no other way to phrase these things, you know. If I'm being... Like, the difference between those two is I feel like Niski sort of, like, enables Blabber, as it were, whereas I feel like Damonte just knows which way his bread's buttered, and, like, if you've got a jungler that good... Probably same with Lyra, by the way, who I thought was criminally underrated when he played with him. It looked like Lyra just told Damonte what to do, and he just followed him around. You know,
I don't know. I mean, I remember when we talked to Licorice, she was saying that Blabber is a big shot calling part, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Blabber is commanding a lot of what Cloud9 is. So if he can say, "This is what I want," maybe it's just that he's a better communicator as a jungler than another jungler. Because if I can sit down, if I'm a jungler and I can sit down and legitimately convince my mid laner, this is what I need from you, here's why it's going to benefit you, that's going to be like, I'm going to feel like I can be Blabber. I can play that way.
Okay.
Yeah, Blabber. That's mainly what I've heard. I don't know because I'm not in the locker room, obviously.
Maybe I picked the wrong team on that one. Maybe I should have picked the team with a mid that just stays mid then or something. I should have picked Flyquest or something then, maybe, you know.
Yeah, yes, that would actually, I don't think...
I don't feel like Power of Evil and Blabber would have a good time.
No, yeah, that wouldn't work. No, would never work.
Okay.
So Blabber with PoE and then Centauran with Niski. Yeah, that's those two. Both of those combinations sound awful.
No, Centauran with Niski would be fine. Blabber won't work well with PoE. I don't think PoE is just not that kind of mid laner for him.
What about, why did you have, why were you so down on Bjergsen though, Malaclypse?
I'm not that down on Bjergsen. I'm just not that impressed by TSM. Like, they've never, their losses have been very bad. Their wins, most of them, like, some of them are convincing, some of them aren't very convincing. They don't convince me. They don't feel like the third best team in it. If people think that they're their best team in NA, I don't think they're the best team at all. And like, when they're struggling, they look really lost. They look really lost, and it's scary.
Did you think they would beat Golden Guardians?
No. I thought Golden Guardians was better.
That's one thing, actually, we can get into, because obviously we can talk about the playoffs as well, is like, I get where you're coming from that. Like, first of all, another reason, actually, I forgot to throw in as to why, in my opinion, Jensen and Bjergsen were like the two best mids overall, is like, they don't have any junglers as far as I'm concerned. Like, these guys are just playing like solo mid for real. Like, the difference is, Niski has Blabber, like, he's pretty fucking good. So, like, that's one area where, I mean, how do you even phrase this? Like, I think for Jensen and Cloud9 to be, Team Liquid to be as good as they were this split, and then just to have a player that the stats even in terms of kill participation and stuff show how totally disjointed Broxah has been. I think you have to be even better as a mid laner to do that. Imagine, let me just put it to the fans a second. Imagine you're a really good player at mid lane, right? And you basically have to play where your jungler's almost never going to interact with you in the game. Are you going to take the same risks? Are you going to lane the same way? Are you going to pick the same champ? No, you're not. You're just not. So, to me, that's I know it's sort of implied. It's invisible value. It's not. It doesn't appear on the server, but that I makes it even harder to play your role. What about this series then? Because I think it's also interesting. Listen, overall, I thought TSM was going to beat GGS because GGS have almost no fucking playoff experience. This team obviously was up and down themselves. They could lose games they looked good in earlier in the split. They could obviously win games that were miracle games. And also so much of it was off the back of Closer just going ham in a bunch of the games. But to be fair, that was something I also thought gave them a real chance in the series though. It's Spicker has had a really hard time in TSM, but Closer is he's an MVP candidate himself probably with how they performed overall. What do you think of what were the defining factors for you, Crumbz?
I think in hindsight now, it actually makes it's a lot easier to see how Golden Guardians could have beaten them, because during the regular season, when they had matches that were very important, whether it was against a higher seeded team or against somebody that they really needed to beat, the match against Cloud9, the first one, and even I think it was the second match against TSM, they showed that they had prepared a lot of very specific strategies against those teams. It was the Twisted Fate and Nocturne. It was the Morgana against the Twisted Fate. So they actually had a lot of things ready to go when they knew that their opponents were going to show something. So the preparation that they showed through the regular season made a lot more sense than what TSM's was, which seemed to be more, let's just randomly try these champions and see if they work. Like the Fiddlesticks mid, that was a little bit of meta, the Aurelia that just got buffed. So the preparation, I think, was one thing that was helping Golden Guardians. It clearly showed, right? They had a much better read on how to play the mid lane champions as well as in the bottom lane, particularly in the bottom lane. But the thing that made me still think that TSM was going to have it was that I thought they were going to have more playing around the top side. I thought that from how Broken Blade had played last year, when you put him on a carry and just put everything on him, you could win. It wasn't the best strategy, but it would win. And Hanser hadn't been that good. So why not continue to index in that when you have a new bottom lane? So I just thought they were going to play that way. They did none of that. Didn't even try it.
What do you think?
The major thing was just how draft landed out, because it just seemed like TSM was lost with how to approach the draft completely. They just kept getting outdrafted.
To me, that just plays into what I think is the core issue of TSM. And at the time of recording this, they'd lost the upper bracket match and they've already beaten Dignitas, who shouldn't even have fucking been in the playoffs.
The coaching? Is that where you're going?
Yeah. So here's the angle I have is, basically, because my problem is this. Even though they've changed coach now it's Path, before it was Peter Zhang in the spring, I think they have a lot of the same problems they had in the spring, except the difference is, and this is the key difference, right? They have the same problem in the sense that I don't think they know what their own identity is. I think they have a different vision of some of these players than I do. For example, in the spring, their problem was they didn't seem to know when they recruited him who Kobe was, right? They thought Kobe was going to be double lift. They thought he was going to be some lane dominant player who's going to play around. It's no. So the weird thing is, I actually think if they actually had Kobe this split, it would be awesome, because then naturally, if you figured out who Kobe is, you would do what Crumbz said. You would just draft the fucking carries top lane and play through Broken Blade. In theory, you're supposed to have two of the best solo laners in the region. But the problem now is there's a guy called Doublelift in the bot lane who has only spent about the better part of 10 years demanding every fucking gank and all the resources go through the bot lane. So it's a bit late to try that now, because I'm kind of with you, Crumbz, but the side I see to it is this. Broken Blade, when he's on carries, is one of the best in LCS. When he's not, and when he has to play weak side, he actually is a weak player. He's just not that good. So I feel like this is an example of where, listen, Doublelift wasn't in good form in that series. He was shit, if I'm being honest. Broken Blade isn't being given any tools to work with. You don't have a jungler, so all you've got is the fucking mid laner. So it's no wonder it's mid difference, is it? He's the only player who you actually understand, seemingly.
But the problem is, part of this comes down to draft, though. It comes down to what the meta is in bot lane, which is you're seeing Kate and Morgana, right? You can't ignore that bot lane if you have to play around bot lane. with this bot lane meta. When you're playing Kate or Ashe,
it's too powerful.
It's just you have to reinforce. If you're playing with
place.
Kate, if you want to play with Kate, you want to keep her in an advantage. And if you're playing against Kate, you need to prevent her from doing this, or else she's going to snowball the game. So top lane is going to be isolated. That's how this meta is.
Right.
And because of that, it means, the worst case scenario, you have broken blade and weak side now. And like you see, you
can just be who was it that was banning both Ashe and Kate though? Because I think in some of the series we just moved. I think maybe it was EG, just double those bans and forget about playing through bot side.
You can do that. You can do that.
Right. Like there are ways to circumvent that. And so I think it's something that has been a problem for, I'd say, almost every single team. In fact, I'd say every single team except Flyquest seems to know that we have our guy that's going to carry our games. Just play around them all the time. Every single time. Like, who's the Flyquest guy? It's PoE, right? Have PoE carry, draft around him, make sure that he's set up to succeed. Every other team, when they have a player that is your carry, they are dropping games from not playing to that guy. I think you're going to like it because of the basketball thing, but if you got your LeBron, you're passing to him, right? You're trying to make sure that he scores all the time instead of thinking like, oh no, we want to make sure that he shares the ball. It's a team game and everything. Sure. Let's try giving a little bit of love to these sides. Well, that's not the best way that you have to win. That's not playing to your strengths or to the identity that your players have.
Yeah, I think that's just teams trying to move past from playing that way of
right. So why move past it and not double down and just make okay, you're going up against IG. The Shy they're going to play around Shy, right? If he's on the carry, for sure what's going to happen. Sure. Just be so good that they don't have a way to stop it. That you're so versatile. Like, if we're not doubling down on strengths and trying to make sure that all the weaknesses are covered, never going to win. We have to make sure that the strengths are that much overwhelming. At least that's the way that I'd like to see the teams handle it, because that gives you the most explosiveness when it comes to beating a team that might be above your weight.
Yeah, by the way, I looked it up now, and you're right. It was EG that was banning both Caitlyn and Ashe, which, by the way, makes perfect sense, because who was their AD carry? Bang. A guy who played like half his fucking career weak side because he had god tier solo laners, and SK Telecom definitely played through top laners as well when they could. So, like, in that scenario, it makes perfect sense. The difference is, again, he never usually has to, but it's not like Doublelift likes to play weak side. He doesn't want the fucking bot lane not played around. And that's my problem, basically, in this series, is if you're Doublelift, and as you say, the meta's obviously playing around the bot lane, right? If you have to be played through and you're supposed to be one of the best, you're not playing against the other fucking best bot lane. You're not playing against Cloud9's bot lane. Like, you're supposed to dumpster this series, Doublelift. It's on you, homie. You've got the ball. And in this scenario, like, let's be real, in that Golden Guardian series, he's shooting airballs. Like, that was a really bad series, I thought.
Might have been his worst of all time.
Is he supposed to sit on FBI, though?
I know. Listen, I would say for the split, FBI is the better player, but here's the difference. I guess they both got questionable supports, but, like, listen, historically, Doublelift's name is enormous, obviously. I get what you mean. Like, I'm with you. If we're doing all-pro voting, I might have voted FBI higher as well. I thought in that team, FBI and Closer were, like, the two players that carried them, basically.
Yeah. Doublelift's have still, like, 2019 was not a good year for Doublelift. He's continuing having probably his worst year. FBI stonks her up. He's playing really well. He's actually one of the best ADCs.
True.
Huhi even, like, he was pretty abysmal when he first started off on his Vol swap, but he's actually stepped up this split. He's been playing pretty well. That's part, like, Golden Guardians. He's part of the reason why they've been playing well. It's partly FBI, partly Closer, partly Huhi.
Well, when they had Olay, they were just running it down in the bottom lane. They couldn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Olay never, literally, if you ever watch the games, he basically never came back from that MSI where he benched himself. Like, literally, like, there's a part of him just left and never returned. Like, because if people don't remember, he used to be a pretty good player before that, especially, actually, if you go before he came to NA. When he used to play in, like, LMS, or he's one of the best players. Like, he actually was a very good player, so I know what you mean. That's just a guy who just checked out. I mean, he's literally checked out of the game now, basically. He's just gone. What do you think of Golden Guardians' chances in the rest of the playoffs, Malaclypse? Do you actually have them as a team? Like, for example, are they a team that can steal a world spot? Do you believe in them that much?
It's if a team's gonna quote unquote steal a world spot, and we're saying steal one, we're presuming one is owed to TSM. Is that what we're saying?
Fans are going to think so. Yes, yeah, that's going to be the usual consensus. Just classically,
TSM.
listen.
Okay.
Let's be real. The broadcast loves fucking TSM. So like, I'm assuming that everyone thinks it's going to be the big three.
Don't lump me in on that. What?
It's all right. You're here now to speak for yourself, Crumbz.
I did not have TSM going to Worlds in any world.
I think it's going to be Flyquest to get the third spot, but I could see Golden Guardians getting it as well. Both teams are possible. They're like the two dark horses right now. It's not going to be EG. I have EG checked out on that, and I have TSM pretty checked out on that.
So how does Golden Guardians beat TL? Is it the same thing? Draft?
I mean, they've got jungle diff again, haven't they? So there's something.
Play through their strong early game. That's one identity Golden Guardians has over the rest of the league. I really feel like is they're probably one of the best teams playing through a strong early game draft and snowballing it and just ending a game. And Team Liquid does not play fast. They are a very slow team. So you're gonna have a pretty like black and white series where you have one team that's just playing the scale, one team's gonna try to play a strong early game, and I think Golden Guardians can smash through Team Liquid's defense because I don't think Team Liquid actually plays early game very well. Like you point out, Broxa is not as strong of a jungler as Closer is, I don't think, and they can make advantages through that. Their defense really cracked.
I also don't think, unfortunately, that you can. And by the way, I don't think Team Liquid can do it anyway. But I don't think you can ban Closer out either. Like if you just look, he plays all the meta early game champions. Like if you take away like Lee Sin, right, he's going to go to like fucking Olaf or he's just got them all. He's got all the carry champions basically. So, and then the reason I also say you can't ban him out if you're Team Liquid is one of the things about Team Liquid that I think is both good and bad is like they have a very limited champion pool themselves, so they need those bans to get rid of the shit they don't want to play. So. Like, I don't think they're not the team that can just waste 4 bans on the jungle.
I mean, if I'm Golden Guardians, I'm banning out Jensen's matchups to give Demonte just a better lane. And as long as I have Demonte on a matchup like Ziggs against Azir, I'm fine. I'm chilling. I know we're going to do well. Bot lane's going to be fine. Jungle's going to be great. Top lane might be even. Hunter has already shown he's got a lot of different picks. Like, that is the only place I have concerns of for Team Liquid. And it was the same concern I had for TSM was, can Demonte hold up against Bjergsen? But they just targeted the shit out of him.
Yes.
Got nowhere. Couldn't do anything. Do the same thing against Jensen, and you fix your own weakest lane, which is mid, and suddenly the rest of the team carries.
Yeah, by the way, just so this is on the record, as I said before, that video that I made about Jensen wasn't actually about shit on Bjergsen. It talks about how people see Jensen and characterize him in contrast to Bjergsen. But let's be real. Like, in that series where they played against Golden Guardians, like, none of that's on Bjergsen. I mean, he literally was fully banned out, and nobody on his fucking team was doing anything. If anything, listen, I'm not hating on Demonte, but, like, you might have won the series, mate, but he was still better than you. He just had nothing to work with.
I feel almost a sense of shame if I'm on the team and one of my teammates gets all the bans directed at me. I feel I have not done a good enough job. If I'm not able to command a ban from the enemy, I've already failed as a teammate.
Yeah, there's another thing to add to the double lift like pile is like, mate, you also had nothing directed at you. You just get whatever pick you want, and you still get dumpstered, do you? Fucking hell, what more do you want? Just a free win? Should we just like? Is this like golf? Or do you just get to start one game up double lift? Do we have to do that to give you a chance, mate? What the fuck? We're gonna spot you a game. We're handicapping it by 2.
Long story short, level 1 invade. Give him the sword.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You know, he needs like. Jungler just needs to leash like the fucking double columns for him or something like. What about okay? You also said you don't have TSM going to Worlds, Crumbz?
Yeah. I don't have TSM going to Worlds. I had TLC9 Flyquest. My question, because I'm really curious about Malaclypse and you, Thorin, C9 Flyquest, because I think we already have an idea of how Golden Guardians TL is going to play out, but C9 Flyquest to me is such a toss-up because it's the same idea with TL, but I think because TL was much more grounded in what they played through the season, I'm not worried about them. Whereas C9 experimented a ton in the back half, right? The Sona, Lux, Wukong, top lane picks, mid lane picks, everything, just trying things out. They haven't had a stage games. If they show up and the things that they've been practicing immediately fall apart game 1, tilt, right? Instantly, like, shit, what do we do now? Are they going back to the same things they worked on at the beginning of the split with the Galio compositions, with maybe the Twisted Fate? But I suspect that if C9 scrims have not given them the right indication for what they need to play, or they have a misread, which we already know they had in the last few weeks, they could just fall apart against Flyquest.
What do you think, Malaclypse?
Yeah, it really depends on what C9 is actually showing up. Is it this experimental C9 that has seems to have lost its identity, got an amnesia, forgot how to play the game almost sometimes, and is playing weird things? Or are we going to see the team that was capping NA for half the year without effort? I don't know what team's actually going to show up.
I think they'll play weird things. I'm really leaning towards playing weird things because there's so many different things to try. They have to have at least tried them out. There's no way they just ignored all the champions that were just suddenly made available. If they did that, they're gonna sprinkle some of those in.
Also,
maybe some Hecarim at least.
Let's be real.
They'll play Hecarim.
The coach of C9 is Reapered, so if he thinks that any of that weird shit works for me, he's going to do it in a playoff series. That's just Reapered's MO. Reapered's the coach where, as far as I can tell, he surprises his own players with the fucking picks.
Well, there's that, but C9 kind of historically had sometimes questionable drafting with
course.
Reapers, but when in 2020 they moved Rest up. And this year they've actually seemed to have stabilized their drafting, at least for part of the recently. So I don't think that's always completely on Reaper, and I don't think that's always completely on the coaching staff alone. But West clearly showed to have had a positive impact on that, especially with the amount of they're on what patch is it? 10.16.
10.16, yeah.
And there's already been games of 10.16, right?
Yeah,
I guess LPL probably.
LPL's playing it. Yeah. So they're gonna have at least some data to work off of and see what other regions are doing instead of just going pure experimentation. So we'll see what happens. I think if C9 gets a hand on how they're drafting, I think it can go okay. But I also think I know Licorice got voted All-Pro top lane, but
that's weird to me as well.
Not my vote.
He's having one of his worst splits,
Dude,
I think.
Even when they were actually the best team, obviously the first half of this split, I even had, when I had him on my show, sort of implied to him, dude, where do these deaths just come from? It's almost because you're going to win the game, you're just fucking around. But the problem with that is that's the same as when they were being experimental. It's all well and good saying, I'm experimenting because it's too easy for me. When you're then just losing straight up normal draft games, that excuse is gone now. Now you're just losing the game, mate. Nobody's doing that on purpose.
Yeah,
it was an experiment, right? A lot of players have been experimenting to lose games. Come on, you know it's a common thing. How else do you know how to play from behind, Thorin? You got to know how to lose before you win.
Exactly. Dignitas must be a regular fucking Thomas Edison then.
That is the talk that Odie would give us all the time. Every time we show up, dude, we're 0-12. What are we supposed to do? You got to learn how to lose before you learn how to win. That was the only piece of advice.
Okay.
Is he saying that after giving you your weekly mouse pad?
Yeah.
The weekly mouse pad. Nice. Yeah.
Employee of the week mouse pad.
Right.
There you go.
Nice.
What about actually, Flyquest as a team in general is one I'm quite interested about in these playoffs because I can't believe how close that series was against EG. Holy shit, dude, because here's the thing, when you say Malaclypse, you're definitely not picking EG. I'm with you on that completely. That is a team that, listen, I'll give them props in one sense. Before, they used to have identity problems where, again, dude, I'm really starting to question the eye test of coaches in LCS because some of these players they're bringing in, it's not like Jizuke came from fucking Australia. He was playing the LCS for all those fucking years. Even he went to Worlds, dude. How does he arrive in NA and they go, well, I have no idea what his champion pool is, so just give him fucking a 0 or something. What is this shit? Dude, that's just not him. So I already thought, even when they were the good team in spring, that sometimes they just drafted very weirdly around a player that is pretty defined as to what he likes and what he's good at. And he's a mad pop-off player if you give him his champions. But I'll give him props. They at least identified this split that you can't just play like 1-3-1 Jizuke style in this split. Like, it just didn't work. Like, nobody could do it pretty much in any region. So I get why they made the transition to Golden Glue, but the problem is he's still Golden Glue. So as a result, like, the EG that they ended up with plays more like the meta says you should play, but they're just not a very good team. Like, they're so fucking average. Like, the difference is when you had Jizuke, if he did have the pop-off, that's why a lot of people felt like they were the sleeper second best team at times. Like, they looked amazing when he would go off. Whereas now, like, this is why them versus Flyquest, I guess, was this slugfest, like, just two boring ass teams, and like these teams are just garbage.
Jizuke clearly has a mind for playing 1-3-1 map setups better than most players do, and when you give him these champions that allow you to play the game like that, this guy is just a magician, and he's just gonna pop heads off on rotations. Like, he just finds all the kills. So, but when you don't play towards that strength, it's always shown like he's not bad on control mages, but it's not like his thing.
It's just not his playing style, is it? Like, some players, doesn't matter what champion, they have a certain playing style, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the only one that fails to put a player in a draft that benefits them. I mean, how many times have we seen Someday with a tank? Right?
Oh, of course, yes.
It always comes back. Like, he's so, like, you have an amazing carry here, but for some reason, got to try him out, right? Or even like a Huni experiment. We got to put him on the Karma. Got to see where this one ends. Like, not like we've seen this one a million times before. So I don't think it's a problem that is exclusive EG. I think it's just everybody has a hard time figuring out what.
Putting Huni on Karma should be like a fucking war crime or something. Like, that's like, I'm sure that's against the Geneva Convention.
He likes
that's
Karma.
Fucking, even if he does, that's just sick and wrong.
You got to slap that hand down.
Exactly. Yeah, but listen, little kids like cookies, but you got to slap their hand away, like Crumbz says, you know.
I know, but he likes it. You remember when the Frostmancy build came out, Crumbz?
Yes.
Well, he was one of the guys that brought that to the West. He was one of the first ones. He loved playing it. That's where he got. Yeah, he loves it. I can't. He loves it.
He loves it for, like, I feel like those are a lot of the teams obviously love to draft with the players' input, right? Some have less, some others. I think EG clearly has some player input here, but you gotta draw the line somewhere. Like, are you trying to appease your player at some point? Like, is it just all about, I'm just gonna make sure that they're happy the entire time? Because sometimes you just gotta say, this is what's best. Like, this clearly, the game against TL, we have no damage. We cannot give you this pick. We will lose.
Yes.
Well, I mean, obviously it comes down to doing it in practice, but you have to do it on stage as well. But we shouldn't limit players to how we already perceive them. They should be able to grow into something else as well, right?
Sure.
They can become more than what they are already, right? It's not just some days on a tank. If they're some days on a tank, it means they're playing through another lane, right? They want to play through that lane. They want to play through that play style. They want to develop towards that way. It's okay for them to try to do so. Is it the best way for them to win the game now? Maybe it's not, but I think right now, I think a lot of teams are thinking about this, is what we're doing to win games right now is not going to help this region get better internationally.
It's seemingly why Cloud9 did all the experimental drafts, right? Like, they thought they could win straight up, but the idea was, where does that get you if you get to Worlds with a perfect record? You just get dumpstered immediately, I guess is the philosophy, right?
That was an interesting question, though, because you say you want to have your players grow into different ways of playing the game. Like, how many players legitimately were terrible at a different way of playing the game from any role and actually managed to learn a different way of playing that is equal or better to what they are now, or at least passable to what they are best at? Because when I'm thinking of, say, somebody like Thorin, I know he can play some carries in the jungle. Not the hardest of carries, but he's always been able to do that, right? So I could see that it hasn't been him growing into it. It's something that he's kind of had from the very get-go. And I see that similarly with a lot of other players, where for them to transition into these different roles does not seem to be as likely as I think it might seem in theory. Like, I don't see that much flexibility from players that are capable of entertaining multiple playstyles. Can you think of any that are like, okay, clearly they were playing this way. Now they can play this other way, and they can go seamlessly between one or the other.
You mean examples of players that can do that right now?
Yes. Or have done that.
Or historically, someone who had a classic style and they switched it up and went to a different style or something.
I mean, I could think of players like Caps, for example, has done so. I think Soaz over the years has evolved as a player.
I think Soaz is a good example. Soaz used to be a straight carry top laner, but eventually became obviously one of the best weak side top players.
Yeah.
Right. So,
even like we could talk about Bjergsen. People have been criticizing Bjergsen as a player that has always been really stuck to playing his lane. He's not really good at spreading his pressure around and moving out of his lane. But this year,
part of the jungle issues that people always complain about. Yeah.
One thing to actually say about Bjergsen this year is he actually improved on that a lot, and this is why you see him playing like set med. He's playing these roaming picks. He was playing Twisted Fate. He was playing Fiddlesticks. He was actually. Did he have the best success on it on stage in a best of one? No, but that doesn't mean that he hadn't actually been doing well in practice doing that, because he had been.
Yes.
It's not going to be like this.
Yeah, of course.
Things aren't going to prove like that, and it takes a degree of discipline from players and coaches that want to go that extra step of development and like become something more than they already are, to realize, yeah, you're going to suck right now, and it's not going to be successful right now, but it's not going to be an instantaneous success. There's going to you can't just bring up rookie players and then when they're not succeeding to the degree that Radaran is, go back down. You're not clearly not up to it. Like, that's not how it works. It takes time. It's going to take time, and I think that's just what a lot of people are trying to do right now. I think maybe it doesn't seem indicative within the success of all the teams. But I do think a lot of the staffs are trying to actually make their players change and develop other play styles than what they've already shown.
I think I do obviously agree it takes a lot of time. And I think that those examples that you named are not an anomaly of the ability to change, but rather that those players are incredibly driven to actually expand and continue a long career, because there's not that many like them, right? You got
They're definitely rare. Yeah, of course.
So these are rare players in the first place. These are not just run of the mill, like, okay, it's just a player that was able to easily change. So I think role swap is a good way of showing that there is that flexibility. So somebody like who he can achieve that, but I don't think it's something that you can put on every player and have them. I think the majority is that most players are set in their ways, and to change that is just not a viable strategy for you. I think that when you have a player that willingly wants to go that extra mile, you can have the rest of the team show up and help him. I think the classic example are players that, at least from just a general solo queue mindset, you got a guy that's been playing, say, first 7 seasons, takes a few years break, comes back, has a really hard time adjusting to the way the new game is played, because he's going to try to play this way that he did way back in the day when things were a lot slower, a lot more controlled. I really see that right now, where it's only a very few that can truly exert themselves to achieve that. So I don't think it's something that is that easy to get. I think it's mostly on the person and less on the team that wants to force that on them.
I've got a couple of points on this one. Like, one is part of the reason I think that when he was listing off the players there, like, they're basically Hall of Fame players. Like, they're some of the best players to ever play from Europe, One of the reasons why I think you have players like that come to mind is because, like, Crumbz is talking here about, like, radically changing your playing style and then being, in theory, as good at that playing style as you are as the old one. So it's not that that's the key thing to understand here. We're not talking about doing it for a game for a specific reason. We're talking about the idea that, like, in the case of when he says someday, he's not complaining about one game where they put him on a tank. He's talking about the trend that they would put him on a tank, because the trend is, if you want to historically win with him in LCS, you would just play through him, wouldn't you? That's the second point that I'd bring up, is because I do agree. I think generally players kind of like have their strengths and weaknesses, and as a coach, you're supposed to identify that no matter what the player says. I do think, though, that for versatility reasons, it's if someone can just do it for the occasional game, though, is a different story. Like if someone has a certain pick or a certain matchup that they can do this in, that's where it is at, where I kind of agree it's important. Because listen, sometimes you do need to be able to flex in the draft and go to the lane someone doesn't expect, or have a comp that they wouldn't expect you to draft. So if you can do it on one matchup or one game, yeah, okay. The idea you're going to do like the weaker style for you at like the world class level, I mean, I think there's an obvious reason why that wouldn't work as well, because you don't just have to be good at it, you have to be really good at it, because now you're going against the best in the world.
I mean, to even bring up a couple other players, you have, for example, Arome, who's the top player for Mad Lions, right? When he first started playing competitively, he was actually like a Vladimir one-trick Pura player. He was the scaling, side-lane, split-pushing duelist. Okay. Then last year, I was working with him last year. He adopted a weak style form of play. He had Freeze as his ADC, right?
Yes.
So he started to play weak side, top lane, played it pretty damn well.
And now that's what he's known for, basically.
And he was kind of like became known for becoming a weak side player, even though he was originally a Fiora and Vlad player.
So this is why Arome. Yeah. This is why Arome and Mad Lions are the ones who always stress on all the shows that they think Arome can be a carry, right? I see where this comes from now, right?
Yeah. He originally was a carry player, and now like he's coming back as a carry player because they're starting to play through him again. Licorice, when he first came up, this guy was playing freaking Fiora. He was a Fiora one trick in NA, and when he first started getting developed, he had to play tanks, so he had to play Maokai. He had to play Poppy, and he started to become actually known for his tank play over his carry play. It becomes somewhat depends on the meta, obviously, but players can evolve and can learn other skill sets. And I understand wanting to play through a player continuously because it's like perceived to be the way to win, but sometimes draft doesn't allow that. Sometimes the meta doesn't allow that. Sometimes they are actually better off playing through a different lane because of how the meta is. You know, I'm not going to fault a team not wanting to play through their strong top laner when playing through and just stacking Drakes is the way to win games right now.
Sure.
I was really interested in those examples that you mentioned because of the timing with which you mentioned their play styles changed, which was at the very beginning of their development, right? Yeah. With Arome going like at the very beginning, switched the style.
Kind of. Licorice. With Licorice, Arome not so much because like
I cannot speak for Arome, but for Licorice for sure. At the very onset, so from the very beginning, they're having a flexibility. But for a player that doesn't start off from that and sees success with a certain style, I think the flexibility comes from with what Thorin and you were saying, which is you just get a single matchup, right? So, okay, I can't play strong side, I can't play weak side right now, but I can play Ornn, right? I picked up Ornn, so I can at least have a champion that can help you out. I have the Shen, so we can play this way. So I have the champions that allow me to play that way. I'm not going to go that way. So it's going to be, if you need me on weak side, here's how I can accomplish it. But I think that you're still hitting on the same point of the development of the player. If early on you can expand it to be both or whatever styles you want, I think you're going to have much more success. Because I mean, how would you go about now to get somebody set in their ways? Let's change.
It depends. That's not that easy because it depends on the player. Because it depends. Like different people learn different ways. There's different ways of learning. So when I start working with a player, the first key thing is identifying how does that person best learn. Do they learn by doing? Do they learn by watching? Do they learn through theory? How do they learn? And then also their personality type. Then it kind of would devolve from there. But to go to a further point, we're talking about how things have worked this far. We're a young industry with a lot of early theory still of how to do development. How long is competitive league going to be around? Are we going to be around just for another 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? There's still a lot of things to try. There's still a lot of things to develop and to apply to our craft, right? What we've been able to do does not mean what we are able to do, right? Do you agree with me?
Sure.
Yeah.
So that is partly what I'm striving towards. Is we haven't historically, you're not always going to find the best examples or the best
It's just not that common, is it? People think you just play one style. Yeah, of course.
But if we want to be able to do this from a coaching perspective, we need to learn the ways to do it.
I think
it's going to have to become
a key thing you touch on there as well that you have to take into account, obviously, is the mindset of the player. That's actually a key thing to know, because I'll give you an example. Like, whenever I talk to him and I see him in interviews, it doesn't surprise me at all that Licorice actually made the swap you're talking about here, because even though I personally look at Licorice's skill set and I'm like, dude, I'd love it if this guy was played through and was playing carries as much as you get. He's a really skilled player. If you talk to him and listen to him, he has the supportive mindset, though. He has the mindset of like, right, well, he has exactly what you want from a weak side player as a mindset, like, right, well, I can just get what I can out of this matchup. I won't lose it. I'll take this pick here. That's just a safe pick. And then you get your pick there and you can carry the game. Like, that's a different mentality. Whereas actually, when I was talking before about Double Lift, even if Double Lift actually, listen, with the skill and experience he has, he in theory should be able to play anything he wants. But like, you just know that Double Lift, he's going to demand the resources, isn't he? That's his way of playing is through himself. It's not through other people. It's not, he's not the guy like fucking Prey or something. He was like, I'll just do all right in laning phase and just let my top laner carry the game. That ain't Double Lift. It never has been. That's why I always thought Impact on Team Liquid was the perfect top laner for Double Lift. Those two are like a marriage made in heaven. Yeah. They want to play that way. No one's given up anything. Impact wants to play that way. Double Lift wants to play that way. Perfect. The overlap's right there.
Well, to have more time to try these theories that you want to try, Malaclypse, wouldn't it be better then to focus even more on newer talent? That the more you focus on any talent, the more malleability you have to try these things and less resistance from your imports.
I like where you're going with that. I agree with you.
That's just what makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, I totally get it, right? New theories to try. Like, I'd rather try with the guy that's going to say, all right, whatever you say, coach, versus the one that says, no, this is how I've played League of Legends forever. Because I was still just thinking mostly of the guys that are just saying, nah, this is how I play League of Legends. Yes. Like, I've won titles before. You can't convince me otherwise.
No, anyway, going back, because we got in a huge rabbit hole here, but I remember we were originally talking about Cloud9 versus Flyquest. And what you'd brought up was that, like, top lane obviously will be an interesting factor here, because as you say, despite the fact apparently no one agrees with us, everyone else thinks Licorice is still the best, which makes me think, by the way, that some people haven't actually, like, have you been watching this split? Or are you still thinking it's Spring? Like, this isn't Spring Cloud9 as we're going over here. So one of the reasons why I think this is actually a very interesting matchup, the top lane matchup, is even though admittedly you're not really playing, like, it's not going to be mad outplays or anything. If I had to pick my All-Pro, I think one of the biggest snobs was fucking Solo, who's on Flyquest. Yeah. I think he was better than Licorice, and not only that, as we say, Licorice has had his issues, so even though the name value says, oh, of course Licorice is better than Solo, I don't think that's the case for this matchup. So I think actually this is a matchup where, I know historically Cloud9 with these lineups has always beaten the Flyquest team. If there's ever a chance for Flyquest to actually get in there, though, it should be now, though.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, Solo is, I think, what the bar you want for just a really solid top lane. Right? You're getting everything you want. You can play through him. You can play away from him. Doesn't really run it down for you. Consistent in team fights. Like, it's just very stable, super well-rounded. So I don't actually think that in this matchup against Licorice, he'll show up with a large advantage. The draft that they selected for him in Flyquest, it was more about having him survive. The Jace game was not a good game out of him. So I do feel like, yeah, it was a weird pick. It wasn't a good game either. So I don't actually think that against Licorice, it will be determined by their laning prowess at all. I think maybe the matchup will help, but I just see it as just being like two players not being able to not give each other any room to get an advantage in another part of the map. And if anything, it'll just be about who TPs to the fight first. Like, that to me seems like where this top lane matchup will play out versus C9, because that's how it usually was in the regular season. You have who TPs to the play first. If it's Licorice, they win. If it's Solo, they win.
Well, so Solo Licorice is kind of a historical matchup because this goes back to Challenger, right?
Sure.
You remember 2017 Challenger? It was a common thing. Solo's always kind of had the upper hand on the group. That this has always been like one of Solo's strengths. Also, has been his laning, and I think this year I voted him second. I think he's clearly like on another level with his laning right now compared to the rest of the top laners besides Someday. And depending on how draft goes, so it's like you said, they could just end up in a tank matchup.
You could neutralize it, yeah, of course.
But even if it doesn't come down to like, I don't care about CS difference, but creating situations where you get TP advantage, well, now your laning didn't matter because if it comes down to who's TPing first, well, one of them's going to have advantage.
Are there any specific champions you're thinking of? Like, is this if he picks an Ecton or Set or something? What would you want to see him play to be able to have impact in this game?
Renekton, Set. Depends on what they draft. Like, this is a hard question for me because it really depends on how they want to draft, right?
I think
it depends on what their draft priorities going to be. Mordekaiser's been big for him.
I think Mordekaiser is the only undefeated playoff champion right now as well, right? 5-0.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way,
it's like an interesting thing, actually.
Just as an aside, since obviously you're not on the show every time, I want to ask you a question, actually, Malaclypse, right? So obviously, just like Nidalee, Jace is a champion which has that meme of like NA Jace, ha 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 ha. Even though we're talking about players like Licorice, they were fucking awesome on that champion if they wanted to play it. Do you have a theory, Malaclypse, as to why in LCS? Because to me, if a champion just doesn't work, listen, I know that Closer can go and play Nidalee and fucking Soliko, and he'll carry the game, he'll have 1 million LP. So it's obviously nothing to do with him as a player, it's how his team plays around him in a stage match. So do you have a theory as to why Jace doesn't really seem to work in NA? Because I find that bizarre, because if you go and look at the best Asian top laners, the amount of them that's their main champion is fucking unreal in LCK and LPL. Like, they are gods on that champion. So did the teams play differently around? Did they not know how to use it? What do you think?
So the first thing I would say with Western top laners, at least NA top laners, less so European top laners, is how they actually play level 1. Like, not like before the laning phase, but when they're in lane, what they do level 1 with wave, how they zone people off waves, this sort of thing. I don't really see a lot of NA players do this. You also see this with GP, right? You see Cooney will do this with GP, for example, but other NA players don't do this on G. Impact will do the same. He knows how to do this. So that's part of it. Part of it also is we're not the best region at snowballing. We've never really been a strong region at snowballing. Jace wants to snowball. It's playing through this lane, then moving him, pivoting him, continuously playing through that pressure is not something we're very good at doing. Okay. We've always been a region that doesn't really play early game, plays to mid game, plays for team fights.
Yes.
That's NA's style, basically, if you want to call it a style. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Style. So because of that, it doesn't really play into Jace's wheelhouse, really, and how he wants to play.
I think if I have to add one more thing that strikes me about the carry top laners that seems to be the thing with a lot of top laners in general in the net is that they're willing, like, team fight happens, I see a 1-for-1 opportunity, they'll go for the 1-for-1. Like, they'll just die. Like, they're willing to go for a play and die. Whereas if you're playing a carry, I think the attitude should be, I cannot die. I cannot afford. I have to gain as much of an advantage as possible and keep myself alive as long as I can. Where the Jace would gladly jump in, take one out, kill himself as well. I'm like, okay, well, now you're just setting yourself further behind instead of just slowly accumulating the advantages. There's not enough patience to say my advantage growth will have to go through the entire game. I'm not just going to blow my load at the dragon fight, lose right here, or maybe win it, but then now I have to start again to start building up wave control or even get back to the lane and start farming. So I think that the willingness to die in a fight, or maybe it's difficult at engaging in the team, that's getting a lot of Jaces or carry champions killed when they should just be thinking about their own advantage the whole way through instead of what is the best or how to play the fight without dying.
I agree with that.
Right, here's the tough question. I want to see where you come down on this. At Malaclypse, who do you actually think is going to win LCS? Who's the best team in your opinion?
His eyes got big. Shit, that's a big question.
I don't even know. I'm going to tell you the truth. I haven't even looked at how the bracket falls out, so I don't know how it eventually ends up, but I'm still just going to say TL. I think it's just going to be TL. Because as playoffs generally go, teams will play more reserved.
Yes.
That plays how TL wants to play already, because they play a pretty slow game, and they're going to be happy about it. They're not going to be that upset about it. And they have a lot of veterancy on that team with the firepower to back it up, being Jensen and Tactical. So it's going to be TL.
What do you think, Crumbz?
I mean, if we can get past Golden Gardens potentially upsetting them, which is not likely but possible, I think that if Flyquest beats Cloud9, they will have I think they will beat Team Liquid. I do think the lower bracket will actually beat Team. I think Flyquest has a better matchup against Team Liquid than most teams. And if it's not Flyquest, and if it's C9, that would have likely meant that C9 is back on form. But this is not the old team that's struggling. So if C9 can get past Flyquest, the old C9 should also be Team Liquid. So I see that those two would be the ones to win and not entirely TL. But then again, the veteranship of Team Liquid is just unbelievable at this point. It's hard to say how hard they can just turn it on for playoffs, because we know that, it's playoffs. Here comes Impact. He's trying now. Oh shit! No one's played against us all year long, right? Completely new player. Same thing with Genesis. What if Broxa actually was the same kind of player, right? We've literally never seen Brox in a playoff match. What if he just rans it down all season long, and then suddenly playoff Broxa shows up and just styles on everyone?
We've seen Brox in playoffs, just not in NA.
Yeah, just not in NA. But maybe the NA culture just gets you bottled up during the regular season, and then you explode for playoffs. So that is the X factor that I have for Team Liquid that has worked for the 4 years that they've won championships. Do nothing regular season, win it all at the end just because you've got better players. And even if they edge it out, it's still that factor that got them the win.
I'm definitely with you on the fact that, first of all, just shows how weird and, quite frankly, I think weak LCS is at the moment. The fact that TSM and Team Liquid were two of the top-ranked teams, essentially with no fucking jungler, is really alarming to me. But as a result, it makes the playoff bracket super interesting, because these lower teams or middle teams have the junglers, bizarrely. So, Santorin's another player who definitely deserves All-Pro. That guy was doing pretty well. He was another one of the better players on Flyquest. So, there's an edge they have right there. Jungle edge definitely goes to Flyquest.
And Thorin does not lose you games. That is one thing that he has. If his worst game was the one against 100 Thieves, and he made one play that I don't think I've seen him make all year long, flashing in to die right away. He'll rarely make that kind of move, which is more than you can say for Blabber and Closer, because those two definitely go in at times, and you just, you lost the game. If we're not ready to follow you up, we're going to lose. So that is one thing that Santorin is super clutch. And I actually think as one of the better stories for the LCS, I was on the team that I thought he was done when he joined. He went from TSM to NRG. It's all right, shit. Back to Flyquest, and then back when Flyquest wasn't getting anywhere too, it's oh boy, all right, it's just another NRG version. But suddenly it turned the shit around, and so it's part of what Malaclypse was hinting at, where we don't actually know how far a career, the trajectory of a career, the trajectory of a player. Sure. We just don't know. Is it possible that you can have a 5-year dip and then suddenly turn up again? How far should we give leniency to a player for struggling? I still don't know.
I mean, it comes down to how much the results of a team we weigh on the individuals on the team, right? And how much that individual factor led to the team's results, if you get what I'm reading towards, right? How much do we blame Santorin for all his past teams or anything like that? Right. He was always playing really well in solo queue. Everyone always remarked how well of a player, or how good of a player he was in solo queue, especially when he went back to Europe to play. Everyone always popped off about him. It's holy shit, Santorin's insane.
Sure.
So, and I think that's probably a big thing for the longevity of the scene is how we actually gauge players individually, because I don't think we really have the best ideas to do that yet. I think All-Pros are a really good example of where the only reason there's people that voted Sunday for first is because the narrative around him being so good and on a team like 100 Thieves. Otherwise, that would never have happened. That would never have happened. Never have happened. Even though he was the best top laner in it.
Yes. But it's just that the fans got the narrative right in that case, except it wasn't in the kit. Like, they were doing it because he's on a bad team. Yeah, I get the angle on that. That was what was sexy about the narrative, whereas the narrative should just be he's the best top laner.
Yeah.
You can stop there.
So, I mean, we'll see how things go.
How much do you value Soliko when judging a player?
In what region?
NA.
Not at all. I shouldn't say not at all.
Not much, though.
If a player is from NA, I could look at a player in solo queue like a young player, right? For instance, Winston on TSM. He's the guy that's on Academy right now, the jungler on TSM. He was the highest LP jungle for most of 2020 on solo queue. I actually watched him because, you know, before he was on TSM, there was like some interest there. He's actually really good. So there is like some things you can look at solo queue, but I'm not looking at like their LP. I don't care about their champion pool so much. I'm gonna watch their play and watch for cute things that they're doing, because there's a lot of things that are learnable about the game. I don't care if the player knows things that they can learn. It's the intrinsic stuff, right? I think it's like what Licorice had, or like things like our current mid laner Insanity has. There's like intrinsic, really valuable things as a player that you just don't really learn that they have. So to actually answer the question, not very much, but I do. It's part of the factor, but not very much. If I was in Europe, it'd be more of a factor.
Yeah, one thing about the Flyquest team, actually, I can see why you're doing like the opposite pick there, Crumbz, that you think Flyquest will beat C9. My problem is this. On the C9 side, I'm sort of doing it irrationally. Like, I'm basically just picking C9 because I think they have overall better players, and something just tells me there's just pure speculation that like they can flip the switch and maybe just come back and be really good again. So in that scenario, I think they beat Flyquest. They obviously always did in the past. But I don't blame you for that pick though. Like, first of all, in terms of form, Flyquest ended the split way better. I mean, they didn't look awesome in this first series, but whatever. It's whatever. It was a weird matchup. Then also, you look at like, mate, this couldn't be a better meta for fucking Power of Evil. This is like his picks exactly what's that like. He would pick this shit even if this was a carry, like, assassin meta, so it's already played into his wheelhouse. And in LCS, bizarrely, considering like early, if you go back to the beginning of the split, teams were snowballing the fuck out of everyone. Now, all of a sudden, scaling's back in fashion again. That never goes out of fashion in the playoffs for some reason. So, like, I think they've got the pieces to do it, put it that way. They've got some nice, stable pieces. There's not really anyone bad overall on Flyquest, I don't think. Like, it's a pretty solid team. It just shouldn't win LCS, in my opinion. Like, I don't think they've got the players they should win.
There is one thing that I think could actually be really detrimental to Flyquest, is that Ignar is allergic to laning. And if the bottom lane of C9 is actually going to be playing a strong emphasis on laning, that is going to really hurt Flyquest, because I don't think in any matchup where they've faced, Turtle and Ignar have held their own against Vulcan and Sven. Like, it usually is Sven and Vulcan favored. So if Ignar is just leaving the lane and not getting anything done, you're just giving C9 a free room to get an advantage from the bottom lane, and then easily start playing from the point where they have confidence and say, all right, well, we've got a pressure here in the bottom lane. Let's just do something here. Because that is the one area that they've even been outspoken. Cloud9 members are like, yeah, Ignar hates laning. He'll always leave lane. He'll never look for anything else. So they already know how they play. And if they just index into that, give Ignar his roaming picks, pick on the bottom lane, they have a really good way of just giving themselves an advantage if they're putting top lane on an island matchup like we think could happen as well.
Even though people are going to think I'm hating when I say this, it's to make a point, right? Which is, even though it doesn't quite make sense what I'm about to say, because Jizuki was actually benched, if you want to have really high salary and keep getting hired over and over in LCS, where, like we've basically sort of implied earlier, maybe even some of the staff and people who watch the games don't actually, like, they aren't super knowledgeable and their eye test's a bit dodgy about knowing players. The two players you want to watch, here's how you have a long career in NA, is Ignar and Jizuki. Because here's the thing, the games that they win, they're going to look fucking amazing. The games they lose, you forget those. You forget the misses. You remember the hits. That's the problem. Because, dude, Ignar plays in a way that I'm very familiar with coming from Counter-Strike, right? Which is there are players... This is mainly back in the old school days, but you would have pro players who were like low-level pros, and all they did was play like a super abusive playing style. And the point is, the time it works, you will look so amazing that that's what you make the frag movie out of. That's the clip you take for the highlight, right? And you're going to look like, God damn, look at this player. But what you don't see, because no one's going to put this in a highlight video, is the 10 games where that just made you shit the bed completely and you actually cost your team the game. So the same thing, dude, Ignar plays like he's it's like, I'm making this up completely here, this is humour, but he plays like he was like an old school fan of Mad Life, right? And he's like, but he wasn't a fan like of the pro games. He was watching the highlights, you know, when every highlight of Mad Life was like fucking flash blind blitz hook through a fucking bush or whatever, like, and you're like, how the fuck did he learn that? It's like Ignar's trying to create his own highlight movie. He doesn't care about the results of the games in the meantime, because I agree with you, dude, some of the times when he leaves lane isn't like, it's not like some next level like vision game thing of like, oh, I'm going to roam at this moment to put like a stealth ward. Like, he's not doing that. He's just going for like ridiculous plays. Like, I bet the person who hates Ignar the most in the league is all the fucking mid laners who play against him. They're just like, is this fucker just coming mid again to do a stupid play? Like, which by the way, even if it doesn't work, it's like, how am I supposed to lane properly and trade when this fucker could just be in that bush? Like, I bet the second he goes in a fog of war, everyone just tilts off the face of the planet. If I was Jensen or something, I'd be like, is this fucker coming again?
It's not fun.
That explains how 100 Thieves came up with the Ryoma montage reel, because I saw that one too. I was like, oh, that's hype. I was like, damn, look at these highlight reels.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't know that just like a second earlier, Ignar just went out with vision in the middle. I was like, oh, fucking right. Go in now.
Then the mid laner starts yelling at the jungler, because that's what happens. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Punish him. They see even CS and ADs, and then starts flaming AD. How can he's 2v1ing you? Like, what's going on? So it just, that's his room. That's his maneuver.
What do you think, Malaclypse? I actually think that angle's not bad from Crumbz. Like, in line of what we said at the beginning of the conversation, where we're talking about the TSM angle and like, can you actually play through top? In this meta, shouldn't Cloud9 heavily play through bot?
I mean, they have been for most of the year. They've mostly
does it get affected by this meta of like Kate, Morgana, etc. though, do you think?
Unless Kate and Ashe are out, like, it will be played through bot, purely through bot.
And does that affect the outcome of who wins against Cloud9?
I mean, it wasn't like they didn't have drafts that wanted to play through bot when they were experimenting is the thing. So how much of the experimentation, because I think even C9 players said that, yeah, we're experimenting, but we're also just playing like shit. Like, true. I heard their scrims were not going that great compared to what they were before, which they were speed running scrims. So, yes. But it's hard to say because I don't know what the issue actually is. Is it purely a performance thing? Is it just something weird in their heads that's just going to go away in playoffs? You know, is Reaper going to have a rousing speech that's going to rally the team and they're just going to 3-0 and spank everyone like they were for the rest of the year? I don't really know. Will the Caitlyn thing help C9 because they play through their bot lane predominantly and it's good for this meta? Yeah, it'll help them. It will. It should.
Well, here's the thing. I'm with you against Flyquest. They can do that. But my issue is this. Like, it's going to sound like haterism, but I'll say it anyway. My problem is this. So far, remember, Blabber is very young in his career. And it's not like he got to start on, like, he didn't start on the worst LCS team. But he wasn't like Closer, where you just come to a bad team, but they let you just do what you want because he's such a stud and you're one of the few players that's good that they just go, yeah, take your picks, do whatever the fuck you want, mate. In theory, he came to the best team, or one of the best teams, and he had to, in theory, play top level instantly from day one. Well, in the spring, that was awesome. He only had to play that one style and he was fucking sick at it. My problem is, and this has always been why I've been more skeptical of him than other people, I didn't just crown him as like, oh, he's the god jungler, he's the best, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I want to see you play another style now, mate. Wait till the meta. Listen, Crumbz can tell you this. If you're a professional jungler, it is inevitable the meta will switch. It is inevitable that the way the game plays, whether it's fast or slow, will change. Like, you don't have a choice about that. Jungle is the role that just gets tossed around as the wind goes. So as a result, like, if you're Blabber, I don't feel like he has like the control game. I don't think he's going to be very good at that. So I think he just keeps playing the way he's been playing, and that means if it goes bad, it goes bad. Sorry.
Being jungle is like playing Pokemon Stadium, right? You know, at some point the terrain's just switching, and everything you've done is completely useless, and you got to just switch it up. So his support champions have not looked. His supportive junglers have not looked good at all, right? The Trundle, the set is passable, but definitely not the best set, not the best Trundle, and Volibear, not the best either. So those three that are really important, not really showing up on them. In fact, dying way too much. And if Sejuani starts picking up as well, then suddenly you got a player that's got 4 champions that are not the best, that are pretty useful when it comes to playing around bot side.
Dude, speaking of mindset, there's a perfect example, because that's one of the problems I think Blabber has, is like, even if you give him Volibear, he still plays it like Lee Sin, man, scores for all the fun. He just dives in and goes for mad plays. It's like, dude, that champion doesn't do that. What are you doing? Like,
if he could, he'd go
Warrior
Triforce. Yeah.
In theory.
That'd be the Bork, what is it? Conqueror Bork Trundle. That'd be the dream.
There we go.
Take that matchup into Olaf. Just run him down.
Yeah. That's the play. That's the secret counter pick.
Are you the same on Blabber as Thorin was? Do you have your skepticism on him?
Yeah, because he's never shown the ability to, like you guys are kind of saying, he doesn't really show this ability to play the utility-driven jungle picks. He has to play carries, or playmakers. Like, I wouldn't really call Lee Sin a carry pick, or call like a playmaker pick, kind of.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, sure.
Doesn't mean that he doesn't have it, because I don't think it's difficult to play these sorts of champions, and I think if he has the mindset to play carries, he'll be able to move and learn how to play these supportive picks. It's just going to take time. And while I've never worked with him, what I do understand about him is he's a very smart person, well, from what I've gathered, from what people tell me. So I have my faith that he'll learn to pick it up. It just won't be an instant thing.
I've got a good factor for you. I've just realised this now. You guys referenced it earlier when we were having the Niski Blabber discussion. There's a problem right there, is if they get into a world where they're having to put supportive champions on Blabber, well, if he was some sort of a shot caller, but when he's on the playmakers and the carry champions, that's going to go away if he not only doesn't play the other style, but he's not going to have the same agency in the game, right? So that's a voice gone that before. I mean, Niski was seemingly fully happy to go in for whatever play he called, you know.
That is a big thing, actually. That might be the biggest determining factor with his champ pool, is how it affects how he calls, because a lot of the, like you mentioned, how you communicate often comes down to how you can interact with it, in a sense.
Well, that's just a really interesting point in general, because the problem was he's tethered, right? If you just view them as a 2-man squad, if one is required to change, surely the other one must change as well. So it must take a larger effort for C9 than any other team to expand beyond what they currently play, from how tied they are together. So there's the same strength that they had turns into a weakness when the meta.
Yes. Which also, by the way, plays into mid lane in theory as well, because the other thing about Niski is, at least in NA, it's funny because you know him from when he was in Splyce, obviously, right? When he was in Europe, he was actually always flamed for just being like a Zoe abuser, you know? Everyone thought of him as that. But what's funny is, in NA, his big thing, because he's played around his team comps, is he has the champion ocean and he just roams all the time. Well, the problem is in this meta, I mean, anyone who's watched LEC knows this. This is the meta of Power V. This is where you sit in the fucking mid lane with that control mage, you farm up, and then you go and you win a dragon fight. Like, that's not Niski, though. That's not his style of play.
It's never been his style. It's never been his style.
So I think it works both ways on that one. I'm not just flaming Blabber there. I think it also puts it on Niski. I think his strength worked in the other meta better.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of meta-based, yeah. You can still play Zoe right now. It's just...
At least that's in the meta, yeah, sure.
It's got to be really good at it, and...
yeah, you just got to be really good. The draft has to be right for it. The draft has to be right for it.
mean, even the first game against TL, his Zoe, when they won, he didn't do anything on that Zoe. That was one of his worst Zoe games by far. Like the amount of missed bubbles were just outrageous, and they still got carried by the lead from Blabber. It's a hard champion to actually, I think, tell when you have messed up on her, because there's just something about her flashiness that makes it difficult to see how much further you could have pushed the Zoe than when, okay, you just hit a nice little paddle star. I find her very hard to really tell exactly how much value you're getting out of the Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, when teams pick Zoe, the first thing they're thinking about picking this champion is, okay, I can basically blind pick her. I'm going to push mid early. And if I achieve those two things, which those two things should be achieved, I'm happy. Everything else is just gravy. If the enemy team is a lot of squishies and I'm landing bubbles, I win the game because I'm Zoe. I'm not balanced when I land my stuff.
Yes.
When I don't land my stuff, it doesn't matter because I picked up 2 redemptions in lane, so...
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah. But
let me think. Oh, I've got a question for you, actually. This is, I mean, it might end up being tied to the mid lane discussion, but there's a very big name that everyone else has been putting forwards. Who would your MVP of the split be, Malaclypse? Who are you going with? Who do you think?
Oh, MVP. I would ask Crumbz if he already has that thought, because I didn't even think about it.
All right, yeah, go on then. Who? Well, how about we do this? Let's do the candidates first. So, like, I'm sure Jensen and Bjergsen are going to be in there because of where the team's finished, etc. I know another one a lot of people are horny for is Core JJ.
Yeah, I was going to say
because he's done a lot of big, like, he's had a lot of big players in some of the games that obviously like won the game pretty much single-handedly.
I think if you have to go candidates, you have
maybe Closer,
Jensen, Thorin, maybe even Solo, Closer, Bjergsen. That's it, right? I think
that should be it. I think. Would anyone from Cloud9 get on? Maybe Sven or something. Who would you put? Anyone from Cloud9? Vulcan. This is his split. Okay.
Maybe. I did not. I went Core JJ. I went Core.
Yeah, it's Core JJ. I didn't need to think about it that much. It's just Core JJ.
I mean, it's hard. Like, who would you say would be second at that point? Because that would be the discussion. First to second. That's already really difficult to decide, because if you're taking Bjergsen and Jensen, clearly there's a lot of mixed opinions there. And Core was clearly a cut above every other support, right? So the difference he had with somebody else in his role was larger than Bjergsen, Jensen, whichever way you want to look at that one. And the plays that he was making were just like winning the game, without him, nothing would have happened for TA Liquid, because Broxa was not doing it.
And he's working with a fucking rookie. Listen, I'm going to say it the millionth time. I know he's not technically a rookie by how the Rookie of the Split Award is done, but like, if you're in your first professional year, you're a rookie. Like, I'm just talking colloquially.
No, he's a rookie.
Oh, is that the way it works on this one? I don't know.
No, he's a rookie.
Yeah.
Oh, because he didn't play all the games in the spring. True. He did play some, though. Yes, so you're right, for eligibility. But I mean, I'd just call you a rookie if you play in your first year or two of your career anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's his first year.
But if you're working with Tactical in that sense, I mean, to me, that's an example where, again, not to hit on Tactical, but a lot of the props you're getting, mate, is because you play with by far the best support player. Like, I'd love to have a guy who's just fucking leading me around like that, setting everything up for me. It's brilliant.
Your mentor is fucking Warren Buffett.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Pretty good at trading, I guess.
You're like, I made $100. I made 100, Mum. So, yeah, he has like 10 billion or whatever.
I mean, the second MVP I'm almost willing to give to Solo, because I think he's part of why Flyquest has been doing so well, actually. It's everything is going well elsewhere, but Solo is such a cut above the other top laners that it's not like he needs to be on carry picks to do this either. He's just playing all his lanes properly. He has a big pool. He's always, I feel like every game he's in, besides 1 or 2 that I've watched, he's been a determining factor in a win. And this guy was teamless at the start of the year.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
That's the ultimate case for shitty scouting, right? The ultimate, that Solo goes completely unnoticed. Just
put it this way.
Oh, he's a bad teammate. Like, come on.
In case someone wonders, it's not that like he just had a turnaround of his career and he got way better this, but he was doing this shit when he was on Echo Fox. Like,
yes, he was.
Yeah. I'm with you. I can't believe he was teamless.
People can't, like, aren't able to see individual play. They just put the results of Equifax on his shoulders. It's like, well, you're on the shit team. You're a shit player. Like, what? I'm on top lane. I have to roll with the least agency in the game.
I'm with you on that.
You know, it's so weird.
Maybe next year Solo will get some recognition for his efforts because he definitely deserves it. And it was weird to even see in spring that he was contesting with Viper. If you see how those two played out to now, you're like, how the hell was this a choice?
That didn't age well as a fucking matchup, put it that way. Like, give me a break. What do you think, by the way? There's another topic we can talk about. What do you think about this approach, Malaclypse, where now 80% of the league makes the playoffs? Like, I know the reasons they gave, like, they want to do a full double limb and they want to do all this blah, blah, blah. And the angle is like the angle that the guy, Dannon of Golden Guardians made on some of the insight, I sort of get, like, as an abstract point, it's not bad, which is that he doesn't want it to ever be where if you had a Schalke type team, they might miss the playoffs because everyone wants to see them because they're hot, right? What do you actually think, though? Because my problem is, that's like a good theoretical argument, but the practice, like, you saw the games, the 7th and 8th team were garbage. This was really offensive to watch these teams play like a playoff match. Like, the idea I have to watch a best of 5. You know what I mean? Like, there's one thing to watch a bad game. That's like I said, that's almost offensive how bad these teams are.
It's just, it's something unsettling when 80% of the league's in playoffs. That's all I can say. It just doesn't feel right. I understand why they wanted to do it. It was one of the ways to make double elimination a thing. I understand, like, a lot of the logic of the things they tried to prevent from happening. It makes sense why they went for it. It's disturbing. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. It is disturbing to have dodged the bullet that 1 and 11. How many games in a loss in a row that CLG lose and could have made it into CLG? That is disturbing, right? We almost had that scenario from happening. But I will say, I personally prefer the Gauntlet. I think the Gauntlet as a tournament was one of the most exciting tournaments I had because it does present a much more exciting narrative of you just run the Gauntlet right away, right? Just a clear tournament, like, and you know that, and it makes sense to have shitty teams in the Gauntlet because it's supposed to ramp up in difficulty as you move forward. So to me, that was one of the most exciting tournaments because we have had some really sick gauntlets, not just in NA, like the Cloud9 reverse the run in the gauntlet.
Almost every region. Yeah,
the when they beat SKT, Najin. So if there was a way to just keep the gauntlet, and I also don't think there's a big problem with teams that don't deserve it going to Worlds. I do think that Worlds is a double limb. Why the fuck do you need double limb here?
Put it this way, the only region, as far as I know, that wasn't really good for Gauntlet was Europe, bizarrely. Every other region practically always got the right team, it felt like.
Did Europe ever do a Gauntlet?
Yeah, we had Gauntlets. It's just it would always be won by like the obvious team, you know, like whoever was just fucking the better team. Was like G2 was in it. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Fnatic, I think one time maybe had to go. No, maybe that's bullshit. Actually, they were always in semis. What I'm talking about? No, they went there one time.
Okay, I just don't remember any Gauntlets in Europe.
Like I said, but just weren't that exciting. So
you know, you don't actually even need to have championship points to keep the gauntlet, right? Just basically make the lower bracket a separate tournament where all the teams fall into place for their own whatever line they're at in the gauntlet tournament, and then you have the same thing. You're technically double limbed because you still get to participate, but it's just a different tournament now. So you are. You know you're getting shit teams, but you're okay with it since it's not going to last. Or if it does, well, they earned it.
I think it's real simple. Grand finals of the year gives you first and second seed. Third seed is Gauntlet. There you go. You don't need championship points anymore. Also
still gives you something else to play for. Like if you're like an EG or something, now we're just playing to get in the Gauntlet and see if we can do the miracle run. Fair enough. Yeah. All right, what about this? Since obviously we won't have this exact lineup on whatever the next episode of this is, let's just do like some shadow boxing on some other potential matchups and let me give some thoughts and then we can wrap it up. So one thing I want to ask is this. What do you actually think happens when Cloud9 and Team Liquid play, if they do at some point in the bracket? What happens if those two teams play in a best of 5?
Ooh, okay. Let me Let me see the brackets. There's 2 worlds where they could play in.
They could either meet in the upper bracket or it's going to be like the lower, probably, right?
Right. Like I'm trying to see how they would meet in the.
They would meet in the upper final, and if they go to the lower, I think the earliest they can play is the last world spot decider. Right. I think
if they both lose and then
they have to both lose the series now. Yes,
TSM and EG. Whew.
That'd be dope. That'd be dope, like entertainment wise, to see happen if they have to play for the last world spot.
Sure. Yeah, it would be very thrilling for sure. I mean, the pressure would be insane as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think C9 beats TL. I don't know. I think C9 just beats TL because I think it's jungle diff. Unless Broxa shows up.
It's always been jungle diff.
Right. It's never not been. It's always been shit.
Yeah, I think I'll give it to C9 over TL.
It's just so hard to believe in TL because how many games have TL squeaked by this season? Like, yes, they ended up the regular.
Listen, they never stomped anyone ever. Put it that way. But they won a lot of games.
I know.
They won a lot of games.
You guys against IMT should have basically lost both of those games.
One of them for sure. The other one, there was.
You did your part in that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Was that the Karthus one? The second one?
No, the second one with the flub was we got like 2 kills near Nasher, then we just didn't nothing.
Okay.
We got mid inhib instead of like take Nasher and stuff. We didn't push our lead enough.
Right. Whereas C9 it feels like they actually did something when they lost. Like, okay, I see why you lost very clearly, and when you won, there's a lot more assertiveness out of them. And I always look for teams being assertive, and Team Liquid it has one person doing that. Whereas C9 has at least 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, like, Team Liquid just seems to be this team. It's like, they're not a threat until it's past 25 minutes. Yes. And then all of a sudden, it's like, shit. Reverse TL.
Dude, they're actually reminiscent. I'm amazed no one's made this comparison in that regard to the fucking Splyce team of last year, where it's like they just had that bizarre thing where, like, if they get past a certain point in the game, you can't stop them. They just it's like, in fact, because if people don't know, that Splyce team also was very reminiscent in the fact that like all the games they win look shit. So you never get the credit because you win, but people go, you didn't look clean. But it's like I still win though.
Sure.
Like I'm still hard to stop me from winning. You know,
that's the worst. I'd almost rather lose than take the wins and make me feel like shit. Because in the wins, what do I even dissect?
Of course,
like
it's like in the UFC, dude. If you win by decision every time, no one's ever going to give you the props. Like the guy who gets the knockouts gets all the fucking acclaim, doesn't he? If you just decision everyone goes. I mean, I guess technically you win. So that's it though. Like you don't get the spiritual win.
Right, you think it's rigged.
That Splyce team made top 8 in 2019.
That's true. That is true. What about this then? Listen, the other matchup obviously everyone wants to see, potentially for all the shit talking and the drama, is if Team Liquid and TSM play. I think a lot of people want to see that at some point in time.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know if we'll get to see it yet, because obviously it probably have to take place. I doubt TSM's making the final, so I'm going to say it's going to have to take place in the lower bracket. If these two teams play, can TSM beat Malaclypse? You think it's doable?
No. not remote, no.
I think you think
like makes fun of them.
I think you think TSM and EG are at the end of the line in this round. Like there's no way whoever they face from upper bracket they lose, right?
Yeah.
Because by the way, I'm not joking. Like the problem is, like I say, I don't think they're going to play because unfortunately I don't think TSM's going to reach the final, and I don't think Team Liquid's just going to lose immediately and play them lower. So I personally and sadly don't think they'll have this matchup. But I would really love it because first of all, with the style we were just describing with Team Liquid there, that's going to work against TSM. TSM still has no clue what their fucking identity is. And so like, as a result, I could easily see them just losing to like the same boring shit over and over again, the same champions over and over again, and in the same way, and being like, what are we supposed to do? And by the way, in light of the video I just made, the context of Jensen winning a best of 5 against both Doublelift and Bjergsen, that's a fucking chef's kiss right there. That would be prime Schadenfreude. That'd be delicious. Oh, it'd be so. And by the way, listen, Jensen has this in him, so I'm just saying right now, if you win that, I told him this on the show I did with him. I want to hear the most epic trash talk of all time if you win that game. Just seriously, just go straight on. Just think of all the times they fucked you, those fans, when they were mocking you, the fucking Sven doing the like looking over. Just you gotta channel all of that and just become Incarnation for one tweet at least, one post game interview, please. Just bring it back.
Oof.
Don't DDoS anyone, obviously, you know, but like, just diss him. Just diss him is all I'm saying, you know.
I wonder if he's got a little secret jersey there with Incarnation printed on the back that he wears when he has to bring out his A game.
It's not WWE, you know. Crumbz like, wait a minute,
stage, right?
Whose music is that? Incarnation? Oh my god! It's not like Sting from WCW. He didn't come down from the rafters. That's it. I will say though that would be baller, by the way, is if he did like craft like a persona. So when he's just the boring ass mage player who gets 15 CS up every game, that's like Jensen. But then when he like puts in like, I will say like a Carly, but he obviously still plays that like a pussy. But let's say you played it like an old Incarnation. He just goes balls deep. That's when he's Incarnation. That's the assassin player. That's the fucking, you know, the pure toxicity who's going to 10-0 you in lane.
He's Jensen on Azir, Incarnation on Lakali.
Yes, there you go. That's the spectrum right there.
Yeah, I just don't see the hope for TSM and EG against TL. Same thing with any other matchup. I think it's all about upper bracket from here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think this is part of the falling part of the double elimination.
Yes,
I don't think you're ever going to get interesting matches from it.
Yes. The sad thing is as well, by the way, like Europe has double elim, but in a different way where it's like, it depends what seed you are as to where you drop to. And it's not really like, you don't play as many games, basically. It's kind of like a gauntlet almost in the low bracket. The real irony of that, by the way, is this split would be amazing with real double elim in LEC. Like, look at the fucking teams there. That's the matchups you want to see in the lower bracket. Yeah. LCS, like you're saying, is garbage. The lower bracket's you're just waiting for them to lose. You have to wait an extra series for them to lose.
So you're saying we're just too shit to have a lower bracket value.
Essentially, you know. I'll also say as well, by the way, this is one of those ones where fans might not even know if you're flaming or complimenting them here, but I would say this as well. I think the worst thing that could happen for TSM is to go to Worlds. Like, with the lineup they have right now, do they need to not make it to Worlds? Because that will force them to make all the really big changes. Because the idea you can save this lineup, you can't. Like, most of the players on this team probably have to go. Like, I might only keep, if I was them, I'd probably keep, like, first of all, they've already signed Doublelift already, so they kind of shit out of luck on that. So if you have to keep Doublelift, the only players I would keep is, like,
Bjergsen
and Doublelift. And then, like I said, if you're going to have Doublelift, I don't know if you can even keep Broken Blade. Like, if you want to get rid of Doublelift, I have no problem keeping Broken Blade. I think he's good. But I just don't think they can coexist.
It's difficult. I mean, it goes back to the same thing with players needing to learn to play different styles. Is one of those two players needs to play without their jungler. They have to figure it out eventually, or it's not going to work. It's not that hard.
I'd keep Treats though. I'd give Treats a bigger chance.
Treats is good.
Yeah, I do not want to just chuck him away, pair him with Doublelift for a few games, and then take him out. Like, I definitely keep Treats, Doublelift. I don't know about Spica. I really don't know, because there's a lot of, like, Kenvi could be sick. I don't know how Kenvi would play out with TSM, but that's a great jungler. I think
wait a minute.
More promise in Academy than when Spica was playing in Academy. So I see that being a higher potential player for TSM.
What Crumbz meant there, by the way, is he doesn't know like that there's any reason to keep Speaker basically. He's definitely not saying that he just doesn't know if Speaker's like TSM material. I think we're all pretty clear on that. And you know what? If you look at his face when they lose, I'm pretty sure Speaker's pretty clear on that. I think even he knows like this is a fucking nightmare. Like on the one hand it's my dream, on the other hand it's a nightmare.
It's not his fault. It's not his fault, man. Everyone went through it. Thorin made it out alive. Sven made it out alive. Like,
well, but that leads to the question, what junglers fit for TSM? Or do we just go back to the realization that is it actually a jungle issue?
That's the fucking Gordian knot, isn't it? Who is the jungler that TSM can have? Well, the irony is, especially this split, like, they probably should have got Nick Smithy. Mate, like, if anything, he actually seems like the sort of, if they just want someone who just services the lanes, I feel like he's fucking custom made for that.
That's such a... Well, service my lane, please.
I know, it sounds bad, doesn't it? Exactly.
Right.
You know.
Bow down, bend over, and service my lane.
All I'm going to say is, listen, Bjergsen might never have actually said that, but it was there in the sub-communication. You know, the subtext was there and how they're playing.
I mean, I just think at this point it feels like every team has a player that gets targeted when a team's not performing well, when it's rarely ever that player's issue. And it just, the position on TSM, it's always going to be the jungler. And it shouldn't be. But because this happens, and because and this is an issue within our community, is people will listen to things people are saying when and blaming this player, when if the player is actually not doing that much wrong, then it's really difficult for them to continue to improve, because now they're second guessing the things that they're doing correctly. You know, this is like a criticism towards erroneous criticism that people might give people. Is
it just reinforces itself, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it like bad criticism doesn't. You need to ignore it, and it's really difficult when you're in the position on TSM. It's so difficult to do, and I don't think the org is doing its due diligence to prevent that from happening either.
Yeah, that's one thing I actually am definitely with you on, by the way. I don't, listen, it's such a mystery, no one's ever figured it out. I don't know if they actually are ruining the jungles. I will just say they've got a fucking massive stack of bodies out the back of Bjergsen's, fucking room. So it's not a great look, guys, but let's imagine it's possible that they're not doing it. I will say that, though. That's the area that I think's kind of dirty, though, Malaclypse, is if they really aren't, and if they know they aren't, and they know how they play and practice and how they want to use the jungler, and that the jungler's happy with that, you don't ever fucking defend these guys, though, do you? You don't ever give us any insight into that, or tell us what was going on, or do be transparent so these guys might get a break. They do just I feel like, do you ever follow CSGO, Malaclypse?
A little.
Right, in CSGO, basically, we've had two classic teams that have done this, because they were two of the greatest teams in CSGO. At the beginning of the game, it was the Swedish team Ninjas in Pyjamas, right? And what they did was, they had a team that literally just never lost for the first 87 games, and then even for the first 25 tournaments, they were always in the finals, they were just amazing. So what happened was, because they were so good and dominant, when they started to change players, they would just always change the fifth guy, and they would keep the other four for 3 or 4 years. And so what happened was, it's the same principle, except explicit. Whoever's the fifth player always comes in. Well, first of all, the other four have all their roles and everything they want in the game. So you're coming into that's a poison chalice if you ever saw one. You're just taking the chance to it's like the joke of, that's actually fitting to be you are the master of dark arts or whatever the fuck that thing is in Harry Potter. You know you're dead once you join, it's obvious. So the problem is, though, it becomes reinforced in that sense. Eventually, even the players who aren't you, the fifth guy, are thinking, if we start doing badly, how long before we kick that guy? And the other team is the Brazilian team, MIBR does it. They've similar reasons. They have a classic lineup that's won majors, and so they never kick the original players. They just always kick whoever the newest player to join is. Now, in that scenario, again, what I don't like is, it's not that you kick the player, maybe that was the wrong player. It's that, first of all, if there's always a problem with one position on your team, that ain't that position anymore, it's you. There's a problem with you. You can't make that position work. And then secondly, if it's you who can't make the position work, don't just scapegoat the guy so that he does get all the fan hate and then let him get kicked out and leave. Not least because how fucked is that for his career? Maybe he was a competent player and you just ruined his whole image. We were talking about Santorin earlier. Santorin, by the way, was in finals with TSM every time. He still almost never recovered from that period. When he was done in TSM, everyone was like, this guy is shit. He can't play anything except supportive, and he should basically just get out of LCS. And he had to really work his way back through. He was obviously in Challenger at NA. You said he went back to Europe. That almost killed that guy's career. Yeah, what we've seen when he came back to NA and LCS, he is a very competent player and a very consistent player. So that was totally unfair, actually.
Yep. I don't know how it gets addressed, but it probably needs to be eventually, because you can only stack up so many bodies until people are like, I don't know about that, man.
I mean, it has to be the team, right? The team is the one doing it. I don't think the outside pressure can help the team to figure it out, but they're the ones that are responsible. How did it get played out in CSGO? Was it outside pressure that get Ninjas in Pyjamas to change? Or
bad news for you, Crumbz. Got some bad news for you, mate. Neither of those teams ever actually fixed it, because they never. Here's the problem, and this is going to be fitting to the TSM scenario. The reason they never fixed it, Crumbz, is because they never took that honest look at what people were saying. They always just said, "Oh, you're just hating," or "That's just a narrative," or "It's nonsense. We're all we're just friends, and that's why we stick together." And so those teams just never went back to the top again. They just languished. This is why it's fitting for TSM. They languished way below the level that you expect. That's one of the reasons I have a problem with TSM in this whole playoff scenario. I'm sort of with you. I have this gut feeling that they either steal, and it will be stealing at this point in time. They either steal the last World spot or they are just not going to Worlds for the 3rd year in a row. And at that point in time, I don't give a fuck how you did in any of the spring splits or the fact that you almost beat TL in that one day. It doesn't matter. Like, on the whole, you clearly have fundamental problems. And let's face it, there's another problem that ties into this. The other position in TSM, that is the other fucking death position, is coach. Where was the great TSM coach? Remember, everyone flames Loco and says he was a shit coach. So by that logic, they've never had a great coach. Clearly isn't.
Because they have just the same 2 cycling. It's just Peter and Park the whole time.
And whoever says Park's the best coach,
I guess Tony before.
Here's the difference, mate. Jat and their coaches have just one coach to the split. I think correctly so, by the way. Cloud9 has Reaper, who, listen, as much as I think he's flawed, in other ways he's brilliant. He's very good in certain ways. He's got big strengths.
He clearly knows what he's doing over there.
Where's the TSM great coach? They've never had one as far as I can tell.
Well,
I think that suggests something about the org. I don't know what their vision of the game is, that they don't think they need a great coach.
Well, I think it was in all the TSM Legends, right? Because Reggie always comes in. What happens every time Reggie comes in? The coach is fired. Like you don't actually know that you're fired at the time, but it is the doomsday. It's like you watch the video in the ring when Reggie comes in. You know it's over. You got just a few weeks left till it goes down because your entire authority has been completely removed. Now your players don't believe your shit because this guy's the one that's directing everybody, and you have to shut up. So what authority do you now have as a coach? None.
Now, listen, you're obviously playing into my wheelhouse, which is just continuously harping on about why TSM's flawed and possibly evil. But thanks for that alley-oop, Crumbz, because what I'll say is this. Here's the problem. I even told Reggie this back when they were winning championships. I told him it publicly in an interview, and I told him it privately. I said, dude, even if it works now, even if you win the LCS split, it's not like you're going to coach them at Worlds and win Worlds, are you? Like I said, it's just a short-term play. And I said, the worst thing about it is, even when it works in the short term, it's going to kill you long-term because the addiction will be there. Every time it goes bad, you'll think, I could just jump in and coach him. Like, that is not appropriate for someone who owns the org, dude. Like, if you want to be the coach, by the way, start coaching. Be the coach from game 1 of the split and be the real coach. If you want to do that, okay, that'll be weird, but do it. I hate this angle that he just comes in when people are weak. Like the coach maybe he's lost his voice with the team or the team's going to shit. He just rolls up and then just like every time thinks he's going to give like the movie speech, that fucking like the speech from like fucking Any Given Sunday or something, and think they're going to go and win. Like that's just, it's not a movie, mate. Real life isn't like that. Like in real life, you don't do the one big thing that wins you everything. You do the consistent small things every fucking day gradually. That's what makes you great. So like, I think there's another flaw where the org has to just really address that. Either go all in, go and get one of these really good coaches, or just make Reggie the coach. Do one of the two though. You got to shit or get off the pot though.
What really surprised me is that there is a way to compromise. If you actually want to be the owner and want to do some coaching, just don't do it in front of the players in the middle of the game. Just go behind, like one-on-one, talk to the coach. Hey, what's going on? Like, right, have that conversation in private.
Basically, you're asking.
Now you can have an idea of what's going on, and maybe you can influence the team there. But don't do it in front of the players. Like, that is the worst thing you could do.
Well, that's why you also then have to fire the coach, because you've just cocked him completely in front of everyone. Like, you've destroyed any credibility he had. I'm with you. Put it this way. What you're saying, basically, is do what fucking in the NFL Jerry Jones does with the Cowboys, which is, the joke is, he doesn't do it like officially in front of the players, but everyone says that basically whoever the coach of the Dallas Cowboys is, it's almost like they have to just call up the owner and then he just tells them how he wants them to play. Like, yeah, you're going to do this, you're going to play through that guy, like I like Ezekiel, you're going to play through, like, and then the joke is he is secretly coaching the team, but at least he has the good grace to do it privately. He doesn't just walk in while the coach is talking and be like slap the fucking pen out of his hand and just go like, right, you're doing this, you're doing it. Like, that would just ruin the team, obviously.
God damn, Jerry Jones is 80 years old.
Oh, he's old as fuck, mate.
Jesus Christ.
He's old as fuck, homie. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, dude, I'm seeing this. Yeah, wow.
It's bad. It's a bad. All I'm going to tell you is the last time they won the championship, Crumbz was in the 90s. So that's all you need. That's the detail
so
you need to know.
Yeah,
no, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, the irony is, I believe it. You probably had some input then, so it's probably like Reggie. In the same way as Reggie in his mind was like, but I won loads of splits doing this. It's like, yeah, years ago when there wasn't competition, mate.
Yeah,
like, you can't do it now. And remember, Reggie, in the modern day, some of the best players go to the worst teams because they can pay them as much as you. Like, the parity of talent now is way better, more than it was back then. Back then, TSM, like I say, they were only competing against Cloud9 and maybe a good CLG or something. Like, there was like 2 or 3 teams back then. Yep. Team Liquid wasn't even good back then. You know?
Yep.
So really all you had to do was...
Liquid.
Not exactly, yeah. All you had to do was get him over the hump. In this scenario, like I say, if you're going to coach him, you're going to have to be a real coach, like a full-time coach from the beginning of the boot camp pre-split, and you're going to have to coach him the whole time.
Too many jobs, man. Too many jobs for one single Lenovo president.
Exactly.
I mean, I just don't know what the solution is for them.
Maybe you've just cracked it right there, Crumbz. Maybe that's why that accident, in air quotes, happened with the Lenovo. Really what Reggie did is that was his setup where he's installed those Lenovo PCs and he set them up that way. I'm sure Lenovo's a great brand where you can absolutely not have sound leak, but Reggie set it up like that so that, again, he's trying to do what you're doing. That way you can just hear what all the players are talking about when they're playing anyway. And he sits basically in like a big Howard Hughes room with like 50 monitors and he just listens to everything that's going on in the TSM org down to the minutiae. And then that's why he just rocks up in the room like, when they lose when they lose the 7th game of the split, what he does is he just like bursts through the door and he doesn't have to talk to him. He just goes like, why were you arguing with him about that? And what was that pick all about? It's like, whoa, how do you know all this shit? And he's like, just guessing, just my outside. And they're like, wow, this Reggie guy knows a lot about League of Legends from season 2.
They did just build a multi-million-dollar facility. It's probably all wired up. There's probably a room up there with just monitors across the wall, just like champagne bottle for him to just recline in, watching all the cameras.
He's pretending he's listening to music on AirPods. He's just got he's just listening to the comms the whole time and the whole building walk around.
I respect that level of effort. I'm like, man, how do you still run a business if you're spending so much time snooping on their players?
This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Whattathings, Spencer Green, Soliko, Dean Tanglis, Jack Hanna, Hades, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to put a question to me in my monthly video AMA. Do you want teasers for my upcoming content? Or maybe to even take part in an online esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.